Let's be honest, there are truths that we don't share with each other because they're uncomfortable. It's those little pieces of ourselves, our real selves, that we guard closely. We think that maybe if we're silent enough, they'll go away. But when we do this, we don't just hide the pain, we hide a part of who we are. Let me ask you something. How many times have you held back, softened the blow, or kept something hidden because you didn't want to make waves? It's as if we're convinced that our silence will keep the peace. But what if instead it's just creating a distance we can't bridge? When we think that no one wants to hear us, we start believing that we're too much, that our feelings are too big or too complicated, so we hide, hoping someone might still see us. But here's the truth: it's only when we're honest, really honest, that connection becomes possible. Vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a measure of courage. It's not easy to admit that we're struggling, that we don't have it all figured out, but it's the only way forward. It's also about setting boundaries and respecting them for ourselves and for others. Boundaries make room for respect, for truth, and for the real us to come forward. And yes, this honesty might be hard for some people to hear, but we can't let fear silence us. We have to believe that our truths deserve to be spoken. Truth is rarely convenient. It often shows up uninvited, disrupting our plans, questioning our assumptions, and even challenging who we believe we are. It has a way of shaking things up and forcing us to look in the mirror. Sometimes truth is downright uncomfortable, bringing up feelings we'd rather not face or revealing insights we might not want to acknowledge. But despite all this, truth remains essential. It's the foundation on which genuine connections are built and the force that drives real growth and transformation. The convenience of hiding or avoiding the truth might feel like a quick fix. It might even allow us to maintain a facade of harmony or pretend that everything is fine. Yet this false peace comes with a price. By choosing convenience over truth, we end up carrying a weight that grows heavier with time. We find ourselves tangled in half-truths, masking what's real to fit what's expected or easy. And here's the thing: pretending has a limit. Eventually, the weight of unspoken truths erodes not just our well-being, but also the strength of our relationships. When we dare to tell the truth, however, we open a door to understanding, to connection, to trust. Being honest means showing up fully, without armor or excuses. And yes, it's hard. It might even be terrifying. But every time we speak honestly, we lay a stone in the foundation of our integrity, a foundation that can withstand the storms of life. Truth, though rarely convenient, is always necessary because it brings clarity, direction, and ultimately freedom. Truth asks us to be brave. It asks us to choose growth over comfort. And it asks us to believe in the possibility that embracing what's real will lead us to something better than we could have planned on our own. Truth isn't easy, but it is the key to a life lived with purpose and a heart that isn't weighed down by regret. So when we come face to face with those moments that demand honesty, let's remember that truth, though inconvenient, is the pathway to everything authentic and meaningful in life. Vulnerability. It's a word that often makes us uncomfortable, isn't it? Society has taught us to see vulnerability as a flaw, a sign of weakness. We're raised to believe that if we show too much of our real selves, our fears, our failures, our insecurities, people might judge us, or worse, turn away. But here's the truth: vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength in the making. Think about it. Vulnerability is being willing to say, I don't have all the answers, or I don't feel strong today, or I made a mistake. That's real courage. It's the courage to show up, knowing that you might stumble, that you might get hurt, but showing up anyway. We often think that strength is about being unshakable or flawless, but real strength lies in the willingness to open up, despite those fears. Because when we allow ourselves to be seen as imperfect as we are, we create the opportunity for genuine connection and real growth. There's a certain irony to vulnerability. We fear that showing our soft spots will make us look weak, but in reality, hiding behind a mask can actually make us weaker. Think of it like this: when we keep everything bottled up, the weight of what we're holding eventually starts to pull us down. We build walls, we put on armor, and we think that's keeping us safe. But over time, those walls isolate us. They keep us from building trust, from receiving love and support, from truly feeling seen. We end up stuck, weighed down by all that we're carrying alone. But when we embrace vulnerability, when we allow ourselves to be open and honest, we create space for connection. And connection is one of the strongest forces there is. Vulnerability isn't about dumping all our struggles on others, it's about letting ourselves be fully human, unapologetically. And when we show up like this, we give permission to others to do the same, and that's how real trust is built. It's how we lift each other up, how we create relationships that can weather the storms. Think about the people you admire most. Odds are they're people who have the courage to be real. We don't connect deeply with people who seem perfect because we know deep down perfection isn't real. We connect with those who are willing to say, I struggle too, or I'm a work in progress, when we see that strength isn't about avoiding challenges, but facing them head on. That's when we start to understand the power of vulnerability. Vulnerability is the seed of strength. It's the foundation of resilience. And when we give ourselves permission to be vulnerable, we're not just growing stronger, we're building a life rooted in authenticity, compassion, and trust. So let's stop thinking of vulnerability as something to avoid. Instead, let's see it for what it truly is, strength in the making. Imagine walking through life wearing a mask. Each time you meet someone new, you adjust that mask to show only the parts of yourself you think they want to see. Maybe you hold back your real thoughts, your true feelings, even the quirks and qualities that make you uniquely you. Why? Because somewhere along the way, we learn to believe that if we show too much of our real selves, people might not accept us. We might think we're protecting ourselves, but in reality, hiding who we truly are keeps us from experiencing the deep, meaningful connections we crave. It's easy to feel like blending in or adapting to others' expectations will make life simpler, less risky. And in some ways, it does make things more comfortable, at least on the surface. But that comfort is only skin deep. When we hide the most genuine parts of ourselves, the parts that make us laugh, the fears that keep us up at night, and the dreams that we hold close to our hearts, we build walls between ourselves and the people we want to connect with. It's a quiet kind of loneliness, being surrounded by people who know only the polished version of you. The truth is, real connection only happens when we bring our whole selves to the table. Think about the relationships in your life that feel the most honest, the most fulfilling. They're the ones where you feel free to say what you mean, where you feel seen and heard for who you really are, not who you're pretending to be. When we open up, when we're brave enough to reveal our true selves, we give others a chance to do the same. That's where deep connection begins. Now, I get it, showing up as our true selves is easier said than done. There's always a risk. People might not understand. They might judge, they might even reject us. But here's what we have to remember: the people who are meant to be in our lives will want to know us, the real us. And the people who turn away, they're not the ones we want by our side. Hiding may feel safe, but it creates a gap between us and those we're closest to. To be truly connected, we need to let others see the whole picture, not just the parts we think they'll like. When we hide, we're constantly in performance mode, putting on a show, and that is exhausting. It's impossible to find peace while constantly calculating how we'll be perceived. But when we start showing up as we really are, we start to attract the right people, the ones who understand us, who love us, who celebrate us not despite our imperfections, but because of them. These are the people who stick with us through the hard times, the ones who see our strengths and our struggles and choose to walk beside us. Let's choose to let down the walls and take off the mask piece by piece. It might be uncomfortable at first, but every time we show a little more of our true selves, we build a little more trust and make way for deeper, more authentic relationships. In time, we'll realize that the connections we create through honesty and openness are the only connections worth having. So let's not spend our lives hiding. Let's be brave enough to be seen, to be known, and to connect deeply. Because in the end, hiding our real selves keeps us from the one thing we all truly want to love and be loved fully and freely. And that, my friends, is worth every ounce of courage it takes to be real. Facing uncomfortable truths isn't easy. In fact, it's probably one of the hardest things we'll ever do. It means confronting those parts of ourselves, our lives, our relationships that don't fit the stories we'd like to believe. We all have those moments when we look in the mirror and see things that make us uncomfortable, our insecurities, past mistakes, or the areas where we feel we've fallen short. It's natural to want to turn away, to pretend these things aren't there. But here's the paradox. It's in facing these uncomfortable truths that real growth actually begins. Think about it. We can't change what we refuse to acknowledge. If we pretend that everything is fine, we might be able to maintain an illusion of control, but we're only treading water, not truly moving forward. True growth happens in those moments of discomfort when we're willing to say, something needs to change here. And I'm going to do the hard work to make it happen. Facing these truths forces us to be honest with ourselves, to look beyond the stories we tell to avoid confronting our struggles. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Imagine you're in a room full of closed doors. Behind each door is a truth you've been avoiding. As long as those doors stay closed, you're safe, or so you think. But what's really happening is that you're staying stuck, confined within those walls. Each closed door represents an opportunity to grow, to move forward, but it requires courage to turn the handle and step through. When we open those doors, we start to face ourselves, and this is where growth becomes possible. Facing uncomfortable truths also means taking responsibility. It's easy to blame circumstances or other people for where we are, but when we step up and take ownership of our own lives, everything changes. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming ourselves. It means realizing that we have the power to change, to make choices that reflect our values, our strengths, and our goals. This is empowering because it's a reminder that we're not victims of our circumstances. We have the ability to shape our lives, even when it means stepping into the discomfort of facing hard truths. Another thing to consider is that when we avoid these truths, we're not just holding ourselves back, we're also limiting our relationships. When we're honest with ourselves, we can be honest with others. We can show up more fully, more authentically. People are drawn to those who are willing to be real, to admit their struggles, and to grow from them. When we model this courage, we give others permission to do the same, creating a ripple effect of growth and authenticity that goes beyond just ourselves. But let's be real, growth doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey, and often a messy one. We might take one step forward and 2 steps back, and that's okay. What matters is that we keep moving, that we don't let fear of discomfort keep us from facing what needs to be faced. Each step we take, each truth we confront, brings us closer to becoming the person we're meant to be. Growth requires us to leave our comfort zones, to step into the unknown, and that's always going to feel uncomfortable. But discomfort is a small price to pay for the freedom and fulfillment that come with living in alignment with our true selves. Facing these truths is like pulling back layers, getting to the core of who we really are. And as we do this, we start to shed the limiting beliefs, the fears, and the insecurities that have held us back. So let's not fear these truths. Let's embrace them as opportunities to learn, to grow, to become more resilient and more compassionate. Let's remember that every uncomfortable truth we face is a step toward a stronger, wiser, and more authentic version of ourselves. Real growth begins when we're willing to face the hard stuff. And in doing so, we create a life that's not just lived, but truly experienced. Because in the end, facing our truths isn't just about becoming better, it's about becoming whole. And that is where the journey of growth truly begins. Boundaries and honesty are often seen as separate concepts, but they're actually 2 sides of the same coin. Boundaries define where we end and another person begins. They're about knowing what we need, what we're willing to give, and what we're not willing to tolerate. Honesty is about being open about who we are, what we feel, and what we need. When these two come together, they create a foundation for relationships that are both authentic and respectful. Without honesty, boundaries can't exist in a meaningful way. And without boundaries, honesty can become a source of tension instead of connection. Setting boundaries requires us to be honest first and foremost with ourselves. It means recognizing where we feel depleted, where we feel taken for granted, or where we're giving more than we're comfortable with. When we're honest with ourselves, we start to see those lines that we need to draw to protect our time, our energy, and our emotional well-being. Boundaries aren't walls, they're a way of saying, this is what I need to feel safe, respected, and valued. This honesty with ourselves allows us to communicate our boundaries to others in a way that's clear and genuine. But honesty isn't always easy. Sometimes we avoid setting boundaries because we're afraid of how others will react. We fear that being honest about our needs will come across as selfish, or that setting a boundary will lead to conflict. But honesty and boundaries go hand in hand because real honesty means respecting both ourselves and others. When we're honest about what we need and what we can give, we're not only being true to ourselves, we're also giving others the opportunity to understand us better. This mutual understanding can prevent misunderstandings and resentment from building up in our relationships. Boundaries rooted in honesty create relationships based on respect. When we're open about our boundaries, we're saying, I respect myself enough to set this boundary, and I respect you enough to be honest about it. This doesn't mean that boundaries won't sometimes cause friction, because they often do. But the alternative is usually resentment, frustration, and feelings of being unheard or unappreciated. Honesty allows us to express our boundaries calmly and directly, helping us to avoid the passive-aggressive behavior or withdrawal that can harm relationships over time. Honesty and boundaries also teaches us about trust. When we're upfront about what we need, we're placing trust in others to respect those needs. It's an act of courage to communicate a boundary, especially if it's met with resistance or misunderstanding. But every time we stand firm in our boundaries, we reinforce our trust in ourselves and invite others to meet us with that same level of respect. And over time, this honesty builds a deeper, more authentic connection, one where both people feel free to be themselves, without fear of overstepping or being taken advantage of. Boundaries and honesty are essential for our self-respect. When we set a boundary, we're declaring that our time, energy, and emotional well-being matter. We're telling ourselves that we deserve to be treated with care, both by others and by ourselves. This honest act of self-care can be one of the most empowering steps we take, especially if we've spent years giving more than we're able or accepting less than we deserve. Boundaries allow us to be honest about what we can realistically handle, helping us avoid burnout and ensuring that we have enough energy for the people and activities that matter most to us. Boundaries require consistency, and honesty helps us maintain that consistency. It's one thing to set a boundary, but without being honest with ourselves and others, it's easy to slip back into old habits of overgiving or bending to others' expectations. Honesty keeps us accountable, reminding us why we set that boundary in the first place. When we're clear about our boundaries and communicate them honestly, we not only protect our own well-being, but also encourage those around us to do the same. This mutual respect for boundaries creates a balanced, healthy dynamic where everyone feels valued and respected. In the end, boundaries and honesty shape our lives in profound ways. They guide our interactions, define our relationships, and set the standards for how we want to be treated. When we embrace both, we're creating a life rooted in respect, integrity, and self-worth, one where we're free to be ourselves without sacrificing our values or compromising our well-being. Self-compassion is a powerful and transformative practice that serves as the bedrock for lasting change in our lives. It is the ability to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding in moments of struggle, failure, or disappointment, rather than responding with self-criticism or judgment. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that the way to achieve success is through harsh self-criticism, pushing ourselves to meet unrealistic expectations. However, this approach often leads to burnout, anxiety, and feelings of inadequacy. In contrast, self-compassion fosters a nurturing environment in which we can grow, learn, and evolve. When we practice self-compassion, we cultivate a sense of safety within ourselves. It allows us to acknowledge our imperfections without being overwhelmed by them. Instead of labeling ourselves as failures when we stumble, we can remind ourselves that everyone makes mistakes. This shift in perspective is crucial for fostering resilience. Rather than retreating in shame, we become more willing to face challenges head-on, knowing that we have our own support to lean on. This creates a cycle of growth where we learn from our experiences, adapt, and continue moving forward. Moreover, self-compassion encourages us to approach our struggles with curiosity rather than judgment. When we find ourselves in difficult situations, instead of getting caught in a spiral of negative self-talk, we can ask ourselves questions like, what can I learn from this? Or how can I take care of myself in this moment? This compassionate inquiry opens up space for growth and exploration. It allows us to take ownership of our experiences without being bogged down by the weight of self-criticism. By adopting a curious mindset, we become more willing to experiment and take risks, essential elements for lasting change. In addition, self-compassion plays a vital role in our emotional well-being. When we are compassionate towards ourselves, we are better equipped to handle life's challenges and setbacks. Instead of becoming overwhelmed by negative emotions, we learn to accept them as part of the human experience. This acceptance fosters emotional resilience, allowing us to bounce back more quickly from adversity. It helps us to regulate our emotions, which is crucial when pursuing long-term goals or making significant changes in our lives. When we approach ourselves with kindness during tough times, we can maintain a sense of balance, reducing the likelihood of becoming stuck in a cycle of negativity. Furthermore, self-compassion nurtures a sense of connectedness to others. Often we think we are alone in our struggles, but when we practice self-compassion, we realize that our experiences are part of the universal human condition. This understanding helps to diminish feelings of isolation and loneliness. We start to see that everyone faces challenges and makes mistakes, and this collective experience creates empathy and connection with others. As we cultivate self-compassion, we may find ourselves becoming more compassionate towards others, fostering deeper and more meaningful relationships. This interconnectedness can provide a strong support system, which is invaluable when embarking on the journey of change. Another critical aspect of self-compassion is its impact on motivation. Many people believe that self-criticism is necessary for motivating change, but research shows that self-compassion is a far more effective motivator. When we approach ourselves with kindness, we foster intrinsic motivation, which is fueled by a desire to grow and improve rather than fear of failure. This intrinsic motivation leads to sustainable change because it is rooted in self-acceptance and a genuine desire to become better. When we are kind to ourselves, we are more likely to engage in healthy behaviors and pursue our goals without the burden of shame or guilt. Self-compassion also provides us with the space to set realistic goals and expectations. Often, we set ourselves up for failure by creating unattainable standards. When we practice self-compassion, we can evaluate our goals more honestly and compassionately, allowing us to set intentions that align with our values and capabilities. This alignment reduces feelings of overwhelm and frustration, making it easier to take consistent steps toward change. It also helps us recognize when we need to adjust our goals based on our current circumstances, fostering a sense of flexibility that is essential for lasting transformation. And lastly, self-compassion encourages mindfulness, which is the practice of being present and aware without judgment. Mindfulness allows us to observe our thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in them. And When we combine self-compassion with mindfulness, we create a powerful toolkit for change. We learn to notice when we're being self-critical and gently redirect our thoughts towards kindness and understanding. This practice helps us stay grounded and focused on our journey rather than getting sidetracked by negative self-talk or self-doubt. By fostering a culture of self-compassion within ourselves, we pave the way for lasting change that is rooted in kindness, understanding, and acceptance. It is through self-compassion that we learn to embrace our imperfections, cultivate resilience, and foster genuine connections with ourselves and others. Ultimately, self-compassion is not just a tool for personal growth, it is a way of life that transforms our relationship with ourselves and the world around us. In conclusion, self-compassion is not merely a soft or indulgent response to our challenges, it is a powerful catalyst for lasting change. By embracing self-compassion, we create an environment where growth can flourish, allowing us to face our struggles with kindness and understanding rather than criticism and shame. This approach helps us build resilience, fosters emotional well-being, and nurtures our connections with others, transforming our relationships into sources of support and empathy. As we learn to set realistic goals and engage in self-reflection, we find that self-compassion motivates us from a place of intrinsic desire to improve, rather than fear of failure. By cultivating a mindset of compassion and mindfulness, we empower ourselves to navigate the complexities of life with grace and strength. Ultimately, self-compassion is about recognizing our shared humanity and accepting ourselves fully, imperfections and all. It is through this acceptance that we unlock our true potential, fostering a journey of change that is not only sustainable but also deeply fulfilling. Let us commit to embracing self-compassion as a guiding principle in our lives, creating a foundation for genuine growth in a more compassionate world.
Thank you so much for watching. If you found value in today's video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more motivation and inspiration every week. This channel, The Motivation, is all about pushing you to reach your goals, stay positive, and unlock your true potential. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or what you'd like to see next. And remember, every day is a new chance to make a difference. Until next time, stay motivated.